all really want peace, but I think we're at a space, or some people's at a space where we're desiring peace, but we don't know how to manage our own peace. We don't know how to align ourselves with peace. And so because of that, um, we find ourselves going our lives sacrificing or bartering away our peace. So the whole intent behind this whole series is to really get back in alignment with the peace. If you are aligned in peace, that's cool. It's always important to know what it takes to keep your peace. If you have peace, then you got a responsibility to protect your peace, because we live in a day and a time where a lot of things are coming at us, a lot of things are pulling at us and pulling us outside of our peace. And so the whole thing we're trying to do is to figure out how to regain your peace, sustain your peace, grow your peace, and spread your peace and seek the peace of other people. And that's a sign of spirituality. That's a sign of spiritual maturity, is being able to have a peaceful life. When there's a peaceful life, a lot of great things can unfold for us in our lives individually, also intrapersonally, and also even within our health. I think a lot of times we forget, when we talk about peace, we think about our mental health, we think about our emotional health, but also peace rolls over into our physical health and also just our overall biological health. And so when that peace is violated, when we replace peace, you have stress. Now we all know stress is one of the uh, main tributaries for bringing about disharmony in our bodies, bringing about disease, and all those different type of things. So peace really rolls over into every facet of our lives. And so I want to make sure that we kind of capture that. So if you're watching this, welcome aboard. And I plan on to continue this to kind of tap into this series a little bit with the intention to be able to help bring about, increase our elevation in life, and also become more of an asset to ourselves and to other people. It's pointless to be an asset to ourselves. We can't be an asset to other people. And one main asset you can have and bring other people is being peaceful. And so that's what we're going to try to bring today. Peace is something that we all can have. Sometimes our lives get so complicated that we lose sight of our own peace. Peace simply begins with you and with myself. It's just that simple. Peace begins when we have self-love and a self-acceptance. So I want you to use it as a baseline. So if peace begins with myself, if peace begins with me having self-acceptance, if peace begins with me having self-love, then that is the foundation for me to begin to have the inner peace that I need. It's nothing, no secret, nothing real mysterious. It's just that straightforward. The thing that we gotta look at is that when we're not self-accepting and we're not self-loving, we open or we invite disharmony, conflict, instability, imbalances, a lot of discord comes in, because peace exists from being centered. And so when we're not peaceful, we're not centered. So more likely, if someone's not feeling balanced in their life, and that's one fruit, that's one telling sign that you have peace in your life, is a sense of balance. It doesn't mean that you don't get raveled, or you get different things kind of teeter-totter in your life, but consistently there should be a state of balance, and that state of balance is going to be revealed in the level of our decision making. It's going to be revealed in our relationships, not the random relationships where things are not really flowing correctly, but it's going to show it's going to really show itself in how we relate consistently. And so in that, if your relationships are not balanced, then we have to step back and really look at, if my relationships are showing more discord, or is inviting disharmony, or is always irritating, there's a lot of antagonism going on. If all these different things are going on in the sphere of my relationships, that means either the individuals that you're relating with, their core is not peaceful, or you are not peaceful. But at the end of the day, it's somewhere in that exchange, someone's coming from a space of It's come from a space where you're absent of the peace. And I can, and when that is existing, that goes back to what I said earlier, self-acceptance. So there's something that you're not accepting about yourself. There's something that's not operating in self-love. And so as soon as that happens, you invite that stage of all these different things that happen in your relationships. And if you continue to function and go and compromise the peace, then you begin to allow it to consume you, and it begin to change your whole orientation. It changes what you're fixated upon. And what begins to happen is you begin to now remove yourself from seeking out peace to seeking out things of complications, of conflict, of disorder, and you begin to find your base in that. And you find your base in that, and when you find yourself at a base in conflict and discord and all those different things, you become a foreigner to harmony. You become a foreigner to balance. You become a foreigner to peace. And so it's just really that simple. But it's interesting is that we see a lot of that goes on in everyday life. You look at the political landscape of things, there's always things in discord. There's nothing peaceful about war. But yet, somehow we're sold on the tagline, we're going to war for the sake of peace. It doesn't really make any sense. All right? So, or economically speaking, there's a lot of times discord, the sense of peace. There's instability economically, and that comes from because people that's driving in the systems, economic systems, a lot of times there's certain policies or certain acts that's beyond our scope of range of knowing, that's coming from individuals that's in control or behind those medium of exchanges or those transactions. They're not coming from a sense of trying to keep balance. I'm all for commerce and things like that, but we operate in a system where is unjust, unfair balances. How do you know? Economically speaking, we don't operate on a currency that's backed up with anything. So the currency itself is not backed up. The currency can be influenced by decisions by individuals that's seeking to take away the peace for other people, and they think they can buy the peace. They don't have the peace, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. So also health, like I mentioned earlier in the first video, you sacrifice your health when you begin to ingest things that lose nutritional value. If you're eating things that doesn't have nutritional value, you're losing your peace. It might not show up immediately, but in time. So if we're taking in excessive alcohol and we're doing drugs, and it's like, I'm not trying to be super moral, but all these different things plays into pieces of our peace. And so if you're eating excessive processed foods, or you're going out and you're not really cooking home cooked meals and things like that, and you don't have no greenery in or fruits or some of the natural things of the earth, and you're not taking those things in consistently, then it's going to affect your pH balance, right? So that's one of the things we look at when we talk about health, is the pH balance. So if my pH balance is out of whack, that means my body is imbalance, and it means my body is not in a state of peace. And so if the pH balance of my acid is higher than my alkaline, what that means is that there is no peace in my health aspect. Okay, even psychologically, if I'm always emotionally investing into things that's of drama, or if I'm always emotionally investing myself into things that cause irritation to other people, if I'm always conjuring up conflict, that means there's an imbalance with you or myself psychologically, which means there's no mental peace. Okay, so I'm just listing some of these different things to kind of help us to build a peace and discern that the result of when peace is removed, or when we remove our self-acceptance or our self-love, these things begin to become normal in our lives, and we begin to see this displayed. And a lot of times it is coming at us. So I just named some different examples outside of it, outside of our personal space, because we got to look at peace transcends outwardly to everyday life. If you have peace here, you have peace out.
There's a very interesting passage in the Tao Te Ching. It's one of my favorite ones, and it says, "Know the Tao, without it leaving your doorstep, and to begin to see it in the window, but to leave it, you're leaving it behind." And what that means is it's talking about peace. peace has to be known within, so don't let it leave your doorstep. It comes with self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is the beginning to our peace, but often what we do when we talk about peace, we begin to seek outside for it. So we lose sight of the window. We see ourselves in the window, but then as soon as we leave the window, we leave it. So that's what we do with our peace. A lot of times we leave our peace behind because we're seeking things outside of it, trying to replace it with peace. When we don't have peace, we have a void, and we have a void, you're trying to fill it with something. Peace is reciprocal in nature. And so peace exists when there's an exchange, just like anything else. All right. Um, when peace is absent, conflict begins to arise. I'm going to say that again. When peace is absent, conflict begins to arise. Conflict a lot of times exists when there's an incompatibility with our core. So there's things that's going, reciprocally speaking, there's things going in our life that doesn't really match our core. It could be values, beliefs, preferences, preferred environments we need to be in, a certain status, or whatever it may be, wherever our core is in different areas. So we have to visit and look at what's my core in my domestic life, what's my guiding value, what's my principle that I operate off of. Health, I've been mentioning about health, psychological health, also your spiritual practice, what's your core, because everything's going to return back to the core of you. So if peace is part of your core, then things in relationships are going to mirror back around that. So what I mean is there's going to be a correspondence that's going to be evident in our lives. So you're going to see a sense of balance and harmony because the conflict is low, because either you're aligned within peace, which allowing the conflict to stay at bay. When you have more peace, you have control over the conflicts going in your life. If a conflict is increasing in our lives, that means somewhere that we are not matching. There's the incompatibility in that scenario. And so we have to visit and trace, where that incompatibility is coming from, how does it exist, and then look at the attraction of that incompatibility. And what am I doing reciprocally to fuel this experience that I'm experiencing that I do not really desire to have in my life that I'm relating with? For example, a lot of times we overgive of ourselves, but yet in the same breath we'll say that I'm being pulled in all these different directions. Okay? But the truth is, or I guess the question you must ask yourself, do I feel like I'm being wanted or needed? And are you over catering to that? Because if you're doing, you're sacrificing, you're leaving the window and you're leaving the self over here and you're leaving the peace here. So there's no balance. Okay? And so the incompatibility a lot of times is evidence of imbalances. And so what are the things in our lives that will cause imbalances? And wherever those things in our lives is calling imbalances are going to be the very thing that's going to be the source to your incompatibility that mirrors
We're
with
talking
your
about
core.
peace. We're talking about inner refinement. We're talking about peace is an inward job. Just simply put, it's an inward job. And embracing our peace really requires us to understand things that move beyond simplicity. The truth is, the matter is, a lot of times, us, as humans, we complex or we complicate a lot of things in our lives. We build a lot of excess in our lives, and all these different things just pulls us away from our peace. The reason it pulls us away because we start entertaining things or we develop attachment to things that pulls us outside of our balance. It's like I said in the last clip before, when we pull outside of our balance, we're actually increasing disharmony. We're also taking away from peace. Okay? Simplicity is the grounds for peace. I'll say it again. Simplicity is grounds for peace. So if you're trying to get peace in your life, you have to go through the process of simplifying things in your life. Relationships, finances, obligations, commitments, all these different things that we have going on that infiltrate our lives. We have to learn how to just simplify some of the things and find that content space where you can function from and still take care of things and not compromise things. Okay? So I want to put it like this. You got simplicity, then you got things that becomes complex, you got things that become complicated, and you got things that become chaotic. Okay? And so you ask us, wherever you have a conflict with that's going against your core, all right, or wherever your concerns is, wherever it's disturbing you, you have to first ask yourself the question is, is it taking me out of a simple space? All right, is it becoming complex? Is it becoming complicated? Or is it becoming chaotic? How can you tell something becoming complex? Is complex, you still can see the simple steps or the simple patterns that still points back to the simple base. All right, when you get when things start becoming complicated, it's when it starts getting blurry, where you can't see the simple steps that leads back to the simple space or the simple foundation. Okay, when things get chaotic, it's totally blurry. You can't see the connection. You can't see the connection between the simple steps that brings you back to the simple space. Okay, and so a lot of times we have a lot of us have complications and chaos in our life. Okay, having complexity is in our life is fine, because complexity just is a result of a series of simple things that makes that complex thing exist. When things are complex, you still can see the simple base. Okay, but when we cannot see the simple bases easily, all right, that means that we're in a complication scenario, a complicated scenario, or a chaotic scenario. And again, if it's chaotic, it's blurry. You can't even see even the patterns at all. And it gets blurry when it's complicated. Okay, so what we have to ask is, when you look at what's going on in our lives, ask a simple question: is this complex? Is it complicated? Or is it chaotic? Okay, and then if it's chaotic, you're going to have to trace the manifestations back to its source. Now, because it's chaotic, you might not find a source. And some of us has chaos going in our lives, and so we keep entertaining the chaos. If you can't trace what's going on in the chaotic scenario back to a base that's driving that chaos, immediately detach from it. Part of having your peace is detaching from things that doesn't make any sense at all. But believe it or not, a lot of us have arguments. We have things going on in our lives. It just be all swirling around all around here. It's just chaotic. It has no base. It has no source. It has no grounds. The only source is ignorant and is not connected to you. So disconnect from yourself, trying to make rationalize what the chaotic is. If it's complicated, you might have to take a little bit of time. It might take a longer time, but you still can trace the different conflicts that's arising back to the complex state. And then once you find out, okay, these are the simple things that's making this complex state exist. Once you get to the complex state, then you can sit there and start peeling back of all the small traces that makes that thing complex, and you can start getting back to the base. It's basically deductive reasoning. It's basically trailing the effects and trying to get down to the cause. Peace is always going to have a base. The base of peace is going to be simplicity, and that's where we want to be at. So a lot of times we do in our lives, as we continue to move forward in life, we keep stacking and stacking and stacking obligations and commitments in excess. You got to do the very opposite in order to get back to yourself to a place of peace. Okay? Real simple stuff is a challenge because we have attachments. And so simplicity is also a product that arises when we have the courage to detach from the chaos and from the complications, or we're willing to connect the complications and see the simple source or the causes that's got the complications there. And once you know the cause, you have
Peace
power to
is
change
the
that cause.
foundation for us to actualize our full human potential.
If you think about it, a lot of things that we desire to achieve, the advancements we want to do in our lives, all revolves around to our level of peace. When things are not peaceful, you start discovering it's hard for you to advance. You get different distractions that's coming in, that's sidetracking you, or you get different things coming in that's causing imbalances. So it's really hard to stay consistent in an effort or being diligent in a target when there's imbalances and distractions, or there's just flat out just chaos, or there's just no peace. Okay? So peacefulness, us having peace, adds to us being inventive, adds to us being productive. All right? And so when we're talking about peace, like I said, it helps amplify, it helps allow us to advance our own potential. All of us has potential. All of us have untapped things that we're here on this earth, in this life, to draw out and to share with other people so they can experience our peace, our gifts that we have to life. Okay? So you think about it. So peace, so we can't really fully express ourselves creatively if we don't have the foundation of peace. We can't truly have a fulfilling sexual life, all right, if we don't have the peace. We can't make sound decisions if our foundation is not peaceful. If not, because what happens is if we don't have a foundation that's not peaceful, we'll start making decisions from a space of disharmony, untruths, you know, complicated state, a chaotic state, and totally be fully removed from the space of peace. All right. Also, the peace also gives us motivation for our decision making, our self-determination, our willpower. All right. And these things are very key because these are the very things that really that we all is a part of us being human that we have to express. We can't bring out the best of who we really are without having the peace. That's why peace is so important. The best that we need out of ourselves will come from us tapping into our own peace. And peace is owned by you. Peace is owned by me. You are your possessor of peace. We cannot let anyone else come in and take that away. The advancement of us and the advancement of you and myself solely revolves around us having our
When
foundation
peace is absent from our lives, disharmony comes, confusion, chaos, a lot of unfavorable things is invited into our lives. When peace is absent, there's some type of conflict that's going on. I mentioned before, conflict arises when there is an incompatibility or a lack of resonance with something with your core. So when there's something that's in conflict, when I'm talking about conflict, it's something that's not resonating with the core of your being. The core of our being can be how we see ourselves, how we relate into everyday life, our values, our standards, our personal framework that we're trying to operate in different arenas in life. There's a lot of different things that drives our core, so our beliefs, our values, our principles, our self-image, the image that we, our standards that we desire to have in our relationships, all these different type of things all really revolves around our core. And so when things are in competition with that, that's where the conflict begins to arise. But that's when also the peace becomes challenged to each individual because peace is something personal. So as we're talking about conflict, I want to speak in a manner where we can kind of assess the conflict. In other words, I want to put value on the conflict because life is not absent of conflict. Conflict is inevitable. So conflict brings about an opportunity. And so we just need to look at the conflict and see the value that it has in our lives. Okay? So all conflict doesn't have to be bad for you. Some conflict actually is good for you because it might be pointing you in a direction where you need to go. If you didn't have the conflict there, you might just stay on the same course that you're on, and you might be veering in total right when you need to be going left. And that conflict might come arise so that you realize that, I need to change directions. And so that's what we're going to know. That's why conflict, we're going to put the value on the conflict. There's three different things we're going to look at conflict when we talk about conflict. There's a cause, there's a cost, and there's a benefit. Okay? And so when we look at the conflict, we want to look at how can I get a grasp to understand the conflict. You're going to get a grasp to understand the conflict by looking at the cost, by looking at the benefits, and look at the causes. Now, I took it out of order, but cause, cost, benefit. All right? And so you look at those things right there. So I want you, if you're writing this stuff down, just write that, your cause, your cost, and your benefit. Now, before you start looking at all the different things, you need to also, there's a surah in the Quran, which I like, it says, give full measure with measure, and give weight or weigh things on an even balance, and that is your best result. And so what that means is that you got to come to a place of balance. Peace and balance are synonymous. They're in tandem with each other. And so you got to establish the balance. I used the analogy before, is that to have balance is powerful because you can have a bowl and the water could be shaking inside the bowl, but after a while, if that bowl is on an even base, eventually the water is going to conform to the even keel. is going to conform to the balance. Okay, and so you have to come from a place of balance to be able to evaluate or to assess the conflict or have power over the conflict. When you know the cause to anything, you have the power to change it. Okay, so first thing, you want to get yourself to a place of balance. Once we get to the place of balance, as I mentioned about measuring, you want to establish limits. What's the limits? Wherever area you have disharmony at, wherever it is bothering you, look at what's your limits in that area. Okay, what's my threshold? I'm not going to allow this. That's your limit. Okay, when you establish the limit, you now have something to compare to. You now have something to measure. You can provide type of metrics. You can get real practical with it. All right. Then you got to, once you establish that, you then have to get to a means of where you can evaluate. If we want to be able to evaluate, you want to evaluate the influences and the powers or different things that's going to that's bringing in the pressure, or the things that's bringing in the conflict. Okay, so the influence. So you're going to be able to look at that. All right, and then you're going to ask yourself the question: how are these different things affecting stability? Okay, so once you look at what's affecting stability, because when you're talking about balancing something, you're looking at, the different various activities or pressures or situations or whatever that is constantly, impressing you, that you constantly got to work through, that is tilting your scales. Is it tilting to the point where it's keeping you balanced, or is it tilting to the point to different extremes? That's how you can tell if you're getting imbalanced, because you're going too far to the different extremes. So you want to figure out, is it bringing about stability? Okay, so once you start understanding this, you want to correlate this thing to cause. What is the thing that's driving the imbalances or the disharmony or the conflicts in my life? How is it being put in motion? What is it coming from? How is it being initiated? All right. Then look at the cost, and the cost doesn't have to be just financial. It could be emotional costs. It could be, it could be the impacts of that's affecting you negatively. Okay. Then you got to look at, who's it benefiting? How is it benefiting you? Is this conflict, how is it really benefiting? Is it making you become better and it's causing you to grow? Is you taking a challenge to grow? Or is it causing you to go in a very reverse action, or in a reverse course in your life course that's putting you more closer to disharmony in your life? Okay? Because here's the reality is, some of us are not all peaceful. So we need conflict to point us back to being peaceful. A lot of us are responding to conflicts in our lives, and we're constantly in the action of it. And there's a point where you have to dial back and set pause and reset and get to a space of being even. Okay? You want to be able to see things from an even balance, not from a slanted balance. And so what happens a lot of times is, when we are caught up and our peace is being challenged, and we're facing disharmonies, or we're facing things that are not favorable working for us, we find ourselves over responsive and being impulsive, and we're trying to assess things, trying to assess the value of the conflict from a slanted space. I want to encourage you to change that up and make the evaluation, or allow yourself to have clarity to see it from an even balance. Okay? So again, like I was mentioning, measure with full measure. Give weight on an even balance, and then you get your best results, or you get the best impacts with the information or the situation that you have available to you. All right, so I mentioned about looking at, there's a cause. There's a cause that's driving the conflict. There is a cost that's driving the conflict. That cost is fueling the conflict, all right? And there's a benefit. The conflict exists because somebody's benefiting. It might not be you, it might be benefiting you favorably, but someone is benefiting. And so you have to look at these things, okay? But you can't really look at it if you're not even. When we talk about being even, you're really talking about becoming neutral. I talk a lot about being neutral. In other words, so I don't have any allegiance to the situation being profitable, or if I'm losing, if I'm, is it good or bad? I'm dead smack really in the middle. I exercise no opinion. So you want to, and peace is also refining, so it's also allowing yourself
to liquefy yourself, just get real easy. So it's like a big block of ice, and you just want to go ahead and melt and just become even and be able to serve everything. You want to just be even keel and not opinionated on either side, the left or the right. Once you get to that space, now you're balanced. Now you can sit here and assess what is really existing or what is really going on. Now you can see clearly of the cause, what's driving the conflict, the cost, how that thing's being fueled, and how is it benefiting. Okay? You want to look at those different things. You want to set limits. You set those limits, you got those different boundaries you have right there, so that way it gives you a benchmark to be able to compare what is going on. Well, this is my ideal state, but this was really going on. Because it's my ideal state, I now can see where the deviation or where the problems are coming a lot. I talk a lot about that anyway. Okay? So you have that going on. And then you got to begin to look at the influences, the pressure or the forces that's surrounding, that's revolving around the conflict. All right? And then as you look at those forces and stuff, just sit back in a very non-biased space and see how it is affecting stability. Balance is all about the distribution of actions or scenarios, because peace is active. So things that keep going on in life, they're not going to stop. So as it keeps going on, you have to see how is those things being distributed. And if it's being distributed, for example, if I slap you, what's the downline from that slap? There's a retaliation probably coming. I'm upset. There's unforgiveness coming. So what happens is, the stability is tilted in an unfavorable situation because I have all these different things that's putting more force and more weight on this side of the occurrence. So what I got to do to bring the weight or counterbalance it? So balance allows you to have balance. I'm able to counterbalance. That means I'm able to offset the forces with the opposite direction to pull it back to a space of being even and being balanced or being stable. So if I got these occurrences going on because you slapped me, if I don't exercise forgiveness, or I might have to detach myself from a relationship with you or association with you, as I do these different counteractions to change the dynamic of the relation, then I'm able to pull this side of the balance back to where it needs to be so that we can find an equilibrium or we can find that balance, okay? And so that right there is empowering, okay? So we know the causes actually is either pressing down on far to the right or far to the left, or if the causes are pressing evenly on both sides of the scales. That's what we want to know. Okay, so hoping this is making sense. Okay, and so now we look at the cost. We look at the cause, and the benefit. Let's flip it. Now we talk about the cause. There's an effect. Or there's a cause. There's an effect. So look at the effects that's going on, and look at the cause that's driving those effects. Okay, if you're looking at the cost, you got to look at who is gaining. If you're not gaining, then you need to sit back and look at, well, who is gaining from this cost to keep this conflict going? Because there's someone compensating. Somebody is paying for it. Whether it's emotional or whatever, someone is paying for that conflict to be there. So you got to look at that and see who is gaining. Once you ever see who's gaining, then you ever track back to the cause and look at the effect and see the relationship there, and you got power over that whole scenario right there. Then you look at the benefit. The benefit itself is neutral. Benefit is either going to the positive or to the negative. So is it benefiting you on the positive side? In other words, is it profiting for you? I have this conflict, but this conflict is helping me to advance. Yes, I know it might sound a little funny, it might sound a little different, but all conflict is not bad for you. Some conflict is good, growth. You don't grow out no pressure. Your muscles don't grow without you applying pressure to the muscles or challenging your muscles and then allowing them to rest. Okay, so even our bodies, even when we're trying to physically develop ourselves, goes off of pressuring and also finding balance, and then pressuring some more, and then finding balance. That's walking in peace. Peace is active, so that's what it is. So that's what you want to tap into. So that's why I brought out, and hopefully everybody jots that down. You got to look at the cause, you got to look at the cost, you got to look at the benefit. I know what the cause is. Let's look at the effect of it, and let's see the relation and how that's right there. I don't like this effect in this conflict, so I need to change it. Well, you can't change the effect till you recognize the cause. And then once you recognize that, then you can look at the cost and see who is it gaining. And you can identify how is it being fueled. How is this thing being compensated? Because it's only there because some type of way there's energy being pumped into that conflict. And so once you see wherever that exchange is, money. Money could be anything. I might want to get a rise out of you. I want to get a negative rise out of you. So every time I get a negative rise, that's the cost. So if that's what it is, then you understand that effect. You say, okay, you know what? That effect right there, it's a negative rise, but that's a cause. So I'm going to change this cause right here, and I'm not going to give them the responses that they need. So you remove that. That's called balance. You're able to counteract it. So you're able to change the force with it. Now you change how is it benefiting. It's no longer benefiting you. It's now benefiting me because I understand that you want to get a rise out of me, and I'm not going to give that to you. So that compensation has been changed. You know what I'm saying? So I now got my return on my money. It's back in my court now. And now, because I did that, now I'm able to change the effect, and I'm able to change the dynamics of the relationship, which means that I have peace. You own your own peace. Like I said a couple of videos before, you own that peace, okay? And so when you do that, and remember, all this stuff is possible, I just explained, by coming to a place of being balanced and by being even. Make it a practice each day. Whatever's pressing at you, we got different stuff coming at us in life. Take time out to have no opinion about what is going on. I'm not saying not to have one. I'm saying when you're confronted with it, dial back, get neutral, see what it is, see what the cost is, see what's causing it, see the benefits, then flip it, look at the effects, look at who's gaining, and also see who is affecting you positively or negatively. You see it right there. You now have a little matrix I just provided for you. If give me some feedback if y'all want me to create like a little chart or something, I can do that. But you gotta let me know on Connect Pal in the comments, all right? But if you do that, it's gonna allow you to see clearly where your conflict is coming from. Okay? And you remember what I said: give full measure, weigh it on an even balance, and that's the best results. So I'm now able to make better decisions. I'm able to have greater impact in my personal life for myself personally. And also I can interact with other people because peace is active. And so peace is something that we have to own and protect. And by knowing these things also, I just help explain how you protect your peace. You have to go through these processes to be able to evaluate and to assess in order to be able to guard your peace, grow your peace, or also know where to shift where you need to go.
I want to tap back into the inner peace. I want to talk about the conflicts. And here's something to have in mind. Where peace is absent, conflicts appears. Where peace is absent, conflicts appears. So anytime there's conflict in our life, it's definitely showing that there's no peace. Okay, conflicts is a part of life. So conflicts, if we view conflicts and experience them properly, it can point us to peace. But conflict and peace are not going to coexist together. All right. So when we talk about conflict, as I mentioned in the other video blogs, is that when you have a conflict, there's an incompatibility or a lack of resonance with your core. So your peace is an inward thing. That's why this whole series is called Inner Peace, because peace is something that's inward. We can talk about outside peace, yeah, but that outside peace is going to be directed by the inner peace. So when there's an incompatibility or a lack of resonance with your core, conflict is going to exist. So anytime you have a conflict, so whether relationships, whether it's a job, whether with our children, or whatever. Now, it's not saying that your core is right or that your core is A1 top flight core values. Your core is your core. Some of us need to revamp and challenge or reconfigure our cores. And we can tell by that by looking at what we really invite in our life and what we really attract to and what we repel. And so a lot of times is if you find yourself in a lot of conflicts, there's something wrong with your core. Now, your core might be all right, and if that is so, that means that you're probably some kind of way you're interacting, or there's a lot of bridges in your life that you're crossing into different experiences, scenarios, or with people that brings about the conflict and they don't match you. So if that's your reality, that means that you are, quote unquote, in the wrong psychographic, wrong demographic, the wrong, let's make up a word, core graphic. You're around people that don't match your core. And somehow you are interacting among people that's outside of what your values are, what your perspective is about life, what your standing, the principles you observe, your outlook on life, all that stuff. So it's just off. Now, if it is, and you're in a situation, you're always running a conflict, there's something wrong with your core, there's something wrong with you. and you got to be honest with yourself, and that means you need to start facing some untruths because you have these entanglements or loops or these rewinds in your life. How do you know? Because you got all these conflicts keep coming back. These conflicts are evidence of there's an incompatibility or a lack of resonance with your core. Okay, and so what begins to happen with peace is that when we lack that resonance with our core, um, our decision making follows that. And so when our decision making follows that, we find ourselves getting ourselves in a lot of compromises. So it's very interesting is that when there's a lack of resonance with our core, we start finding out the decision making in our lives starts rolling over to the things we compromise. The things that we compromise is the things that we allow or it aids the conflict to arise. Okay, so I want to drop this little thing right here um, to think about. So when there is when there's a lack of, I mean, it's not a lack, I'm sorry, scratch that. When there's compromise, so the more you compromise the things against your core values, the more you're going to give conflict, or the more you're going to increase your conflict. The less you compromise on things as it relates to your core values that brings about peace, not the core values that's warped, the core values that bring about peace. So the less you compromise, the more you increase your peace. Okay, so I want to say that again. So you look at your things that you're compromising. Okay, you compromising. So the things, the more you compromise things, the more you lessen the peace in your life. The less you compromise things, the more you increase the peace in your life. Now, you got that right there. Now let's talk about the conflict. Okay, so sometimes some of us aids the conflict, or something that's conflict with us. That's a whole other thing. We'll get into that later. Well, I'm going to go around remember the conflicts, the incompatibility or the lack of resonance with your core values. So the more you make decisions, the more you entertain things, the more you favor the conflicts, the less the peace exists. And the less you favor, or the more you disfavor the conflicts, the more you increase the peace. So the more you favor conflicts, whether you generate them or you're thrust into or you create them yourself, but the more you favor conflicts, the more you increase the peace. The more you disfavor conflicts, the more you increase the peace. Because remember, conflicts is a sign that there's no peace. All right, here's a thought for you, and actually it's something you can, if you read the Tao Te Ching, is actually it kind of points to this as well. I'm gonna share. The more we want, the more conflicts arise. The more we want, the more conflicts arise. And a lot of our conflicts come from always wanting, not having any contentment. And so when we don't have contentment, that automatically brings about worry and automatically causes us to stack additional responsibilities in our lives. And what that does is that means that a lot of us are operating out of overcapacity. We are living our lives, making decisions, or getting involved in things that pulls us outside of our own range of capacity. You have to be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what is my capacity? Everybody's capacity is different. My capacity, what I can do, I probably can do a lot more things than you are, or you could probably do a lot more things than I can do. But it's important for you to be true to yourself and know what your capacity is, and don't overextend beyond it. The thing that causes overextend beyond it is we always are wanting. We're never sad. A lot of us, we look at it, we have everything that we need, but yet we still want more. And believe it or not, that very thing right there is the main driver and main cause why you're suffering, why you have more conflicts than peace in different areas in your life. All right? And so when we're talking about these wants, it points to, there's actually one of the Chinese character for wisdom I like is called Hu, and the symbol talks about sweeping the clutter. And I want to equate that to peace. Peace is about sweeping away the clutter. If you're always wanting, that means, imagine your house. If you're always wanting, you keep buying, you got all these clothes, right? Your closet is full. The clothes still got a tag on it. You bought stuff you forgot you had. You got shoes you forgot, or you only wore once or twice. But you got all this excess. Excess comes from wanting too much. Excess really doesn't come where you're content. You know what I'm saying? It's just like really simple. Excess comes from when you're always wanting. And so, and more we're operating in excess, what we actually are doing as well too is that we're breeding our selfishness. And us being selfish because we start being consumed about what us. And we all have our issues, so it's not pointing any fingers. It's just bringing about some truth so we can reconfigure or reposition our heart space to make sure that we're available for the peace. Notice I said available for the peace. When you're discontented, when you always are wanting, your heart is not available for peace. Peace feels an open heart. Peace feels an available heart. Peace will not feel an occupied heart. And if you're always wanting, you're overly occupied, you're guess what? Your senses are overloaded, you're in sensory overload, you are in imbalance, because anytime there's an excess, it's all going to create an imbalance, right? Picture a scale. If I put more weight on this, then my hand's going to rise up right here. If it was a scale. There's an imbalance. So when we have extremes going in our lives and we favor the extremes, we're creating imbalances. So, with all that being said, to sweep away the clutter out of the closet and everything, what's the goal? Why are you sweeping away everything? You're trying to get back to being simple. Peace follows simplicity. Peace follows contentment. Contentment and simplicity are in tandem. They're on the exact same coin. You flip it, you still get peace. I'm going to flip it. Heads, simplicity. Peace. I'm going to flip it again. Tails, contentment. There's peace. You can't go wrong with those two things. Those are two key virtues and mental positions and abilities and practices that you have that you should incorporate. It's going to bring about the peace. So simplicity, what it is, we use simplifying. I'm going to name some basic things. Simplify your possessions. The physical possessions and also your emotional possessions. Ladies and men, because a lot of times men think it's not, it's all about the ladies. Men too. I want you to take time and think about your emotional possessions. Whether you own them or not, but in the world of emotions, in the world of your feelings, you possess it. What am I getting at? Attachments. You're attached to experiences, expectations, or environments. You got a lot of shit that you're attached to, and it's in the emotions, and you're moving it. You're moving that energy in your life, and it has you stuck inside the conflicts in your life, and that's why your peace never can rise. Because why? The more you favor conflicts, you lessen the peace. Okay, so you gotta simplify your possessions. Simplify your communication. Simplify your communication. Brevity. Believe it or not, I want y'all to put something into practice. It's something I do sometimes, and I'm due to do it some more. I normally do it in January a lot. I do it all the time, but I just really hone in on it. Limit your word cycle. Limit your word use. Practice brevity. The more words are around things, the more conflicts can be generated. The more there's words being generated, the more chaos can come. You notice when there's a lot of peace, there ain't a lot of stuff being said. Things are being straight to the point. You ain't got to do all this extra excess talk. A lot of people that know me, that's what I'm very big about. I don't do like excess talk because it brings in confusion. Right? I desire peace. I'm available for peace. So I'm going to limit my communication. Because communication is an exchange. So the more you keep saying things, the more you start saying empty words, right? Empty words are going to invite empty things. Words are energy, words are spirit, words are magnets. The words you consistently put out, the words that you are in intent with is going to attract a lot of stuff in your life. So be brief. Be loving, be kind, be cordial, be respectful, but practice brevity. Simplify your communication. Some of y'all talk too much. You say too much. you share too much, and you're looking like all the conflict you got in your life, it's because you talk too much. You just talk too damn much. Simplify your knowledge. Simplify what you think you know. Some of us are so fascinated constantly. Yes, you got to learn. Not the soul grows with knowledge, and you keep trying to acquire and try to acquire to the point where you no longer really, you ain't putting none of the knowledge you got in practice. You become very highly idealistic, and highly idealistic people become people that really favors conflict. Look at our country. You got a lot of people are conflicting over ideas and going over war, and we're making decisions around. The decision they're making is creating conflicts over here, over here, over here, and over here. Why? Because they're idealistic. And there's a lot of talk. So the politicians, there's a lot of talk, right? And then they're motivated by what? Possessions. But now we can jump out of that, but get back to what I'm saying. So sometimes you need to dial back. You need to balance out your knowledge acquisition. See, there's a whole bunch of information out there. But what type of information is it? Is it holistic information? Is it information elevating your health, your soul? Is it improving your decision making? Is it improving you to be a better person to yourself and to others? Is it enabling you to build? Is it enabling you to preserve what you have? Those are the things. Anything outside that, why are you reading it? Why are you reading the gossip columns? Why are you saying you're overly engrossed in sports commentary? I mean, everything we have our place in fun. What I'm talking about is all these things you're taking in, and when these things become more dominant versus what's real. See, what I'm saying, you can take in so much knowledge that you become highly theory oriented versus reality based, and so you want to close that gap of being more less theory and more reality based. So there has to be a shift in your knowledge where it's pointing you to reality. And that's actually knowledge of reality. Knowledge of reality is the meaning of truth. When I define truth, I define it as the knowledge of reality. So if your knowledge that you're acquiring really doesn't really point you to a truth or to a knowledge of reality, you need to minimize that. You need to simplify. What do you simplify? I simplify or I lessen the things that doesn't point me to reality. So the emotional and the fantasy type stuff that we entertain, you need to minimize that. If that's more than the reality, it's a problem. And you know what I'm saying? So the last thing is I'm sorry, I'm doing my little stretches here. The last thing is simplify your time. You only get so much of it. And we don't really utilize our time. But how we utilize our time has a lot to do with our peace. How many of us really spend about 2 hours in a day in silence or just personal reflection, doing what I call it silent listening to the spirit, tapping into your creativity? If you're not really doing that, you're not utilizing your time, because what advances us is being able to have time for creativity. Creativity is what keeps things growing. Peace follows creativity. Peaceful people not create or be, even people that's in business savvy, people that seem like they're making a lot of moves and stuff like that, there is a level of silence that they have access to. I want y'all to think about that. Excess. The more you keep creating excess in your life, the more you bring in balances, the more you pour yourself into overcapacity, which leads to conflict. It doesn't lead to peace. Hey, just want to drop that with y'all. Something to think about.